Hey everybody, this is Mike, and I'm going to show you how to create cash game lineups for small slates. So we're going to be creating lineups for this 5:10 p.m. slate for FanDuel. It's only 4 games, so in keeping in mind that it's not going to have a large player pool, a lot of players are going to be high owned. And when you're looking at pitchers, you're only going to be selecting from 8 different pitchers. Hitters. It's going to be generally small, so there's going to be a lot of players that are high owned, and you're going to have to be choosing your lineups strategically and smart in a way that you are getting enough consistency, but also slightly unique, so you can finish above the cash line. So in building these lineups, starting with insights, I would come in here first, especially from a pitcher's perspective, to get an idea of which players will be higher owned. Now there's certain elements from both pitchers and hitters that you can look at within RotoQL to see which metrics are favoring players, ones that will be trending upward that could be higher owned in a slate. So for FanDuel, I think something you're going to have to take note of, with only one pitcher and the points for a win being so paramount, a lot of those players that are going to be projected to win, Gio Gonzalez is at 57, almost 58% to win. Wei Ying Chen, 55%. So those players will likely be high owned in a FanDuel contest. But since we're in a cash game, we are not afraid of taking that same player, and with their inside scores being above 70, the projected team win looks good. I'm going to add both of those pitchers into my lineups. I want to play it safe, minimize risk as much as possible, and I think these are the best options to do that. Heading over into the hitter section, and this is what I'm talking about when you're going to be seeing a lot of team overlap, not a lot of distribution, because there's not that many different teams within the slate. So you can see that Cleveland Indians, we've got 4 out of 10 players showing up from them. So I think it's going to be a high-scoring game there, or at least a good matchup for that team. But I say high-scoring game because you see also White Sox players showing up as well. So that could be a game to watch. I'm not going to add any players from here right off the bat because I want to use the Players tab to drill down a little bit more. But if you don't really have a lot of time, want to create your lineups quickly, you can add a bunch of these insights players, favorite them, and create lineups that way. You're going to get a distributed lineup if you stick to some of the higher insights players. We've seen that work in the past, so that is one way to do it. Also, checking out the Games tab, this will give you a better idea of what matchups may be best to take advantage of, and with the small slate it becomes much more digestible to do this. So I'm looking at this, that Indians-White Sox game we were talking about. The over-under set at 9, which is pretty good for MLB game standards. And then looking at a lot of the weather conditions, it looks like a lot of these games are not going to have a lot of favorable conditions for hitters, but it does favor both Chen and Gio Gonzalez, the wind blowing in a little bit, so I feel more comfortable about those picks. And you can see that this game, the Cleveland White Sox game, has the best chance to blow up according to Vegas. So we keep that in mind. And now let's head into the Players tab and to figure out who we like from a cash game perspective. I think following what Vegas is thinking is really helpful. A lot of players are going to choose their top plays through what Vegas thinks. So you can see Gonzalez and Chen. I think they're both going to be higher owned than a lot of the other pitcher options, more so than somebody like Velasquez, who's priced just as much as Gio Gonzalez as the top pitcher on the board, but since his opposing projected runs is at 4.3, I think there's going to be some people that stay away from him more so. So if you're in a tournament, maybe Velasquez gives you a little bit of a contrarian play, but in a cash game, we want to play it safe, and Vegas is as safe as it gets. So then looking at hitters, what we're going to want to do is filter out all players that seem like they're going to be risky plays. We're trying to minimize risk. And in doing that, we're going to choose a lot of different elements that you can rely on for opportunity. So for cash game plays, you're going to want as much opportunity as possible. You don't necessarily need upside. You want consistency. So in doing that, we're going to want players that are in the batting order. I'm going to keep it the 4 spot or higher. We're going to really try to be as conservative as possible. And then those players tend to be more higher owned as well. So in looking at the Vegas distribution, now since we're in a shorter slate, I'm not going to take out any teams according to projected runs, but I may do this if it was a bigger slate. I could take out some of these lower total teams, but since there's not that many people to choose from, I'm going to avoid that. But that is one way to do it as well. Also wanted to make sure we're getting players with good matchups, opposed-handedness, or just they do well in that split. So in looking at our RotoQL matchup woba stat, we can then filter out the lesser performing plays from a woba splits perspective. So we're going to make sure that we have only players that are averaging at least 310 matchup woba. So that cuts down the group significantly. And then just to round it out, and we talked about minimizing risk as much as possible, I want to alert you guys to our downside metric, was basically our it tells you which players tend to perform more consistently than others. In looking at this metric, how often does a player play significantly below his average, which is in the bottom 25% of his performance. And so we're going to want to cut out any of those players that are under 200 or 20%. So now we've got players who perform below their averages, significantly below their averages, less than 20% of the time. So I feel pretty comfortable in terms of minimizing risk that this group is going to be able to hit their averages and get me above the cash line. So I'm going to favor this entire group. And it looks like in terms of position distribution, we'll be missing a catcher and a third baseman, but we can let the projections kind of figure that out for us and fill out the rest of the lineup. And so you can see that we've got a bunch of these players added into our lineups that we've chosen. And since we have the favorite players bonus at only 2 points, we're letting the projections do the work a bit. If there seems like they don't like a couple of players that I've favorited today, but since I'm feeling pretty strongly about my convictions, I'm going to add a favorite bonus of 50 to just get all of those players that I favorited, the best selections, added into the lineup. So in doing that, I can see Herrera has been added to this lineup here, and so they'll show up more within this group of 10 lineups. And then as a last step, I want to make sure in making these 10 lineups that I'm not exposed to any one player or one team too much. I want to minimize that risk. Even though I'm only playing 10 lineups, I want to make sure that I have a chance to win in a bunch of my different contests instead of just relying on one group. I want to spread out my bankroll a bit. So in doing that, let's get Jason Kipnis down to 80% and make sure that we don't have one player above 80%. So within 8 of these lineups, we may be relying on a core group. But we have a chance to get bailed out from another group of players as well. You can see with our pitcher selections, we have Wang Chen at 50% of our lineups. In a small slate, it's harder to fit a bunch of these players together. So we have Chen in 50% of these. If you're more into having Joe Gonzalez in there, you can then remove him, remove Chen, and then try to fit in Gio as much as possible within your group. So it would be better to create that lineup group after saving these. So we'll just go and do that, and then head to bulk save, select all, save all. So we've created this group of 10 lineups with baseball prospectus projections and through our cash game research. So this is one way to create lineups for a small slate of cash games. Definitely keep in mind, it's a small group, so you're going to need to be smart with your picks, and this is one way to do it.